Back in 1781, one single battle on the coast of Virginia, it didn't just end a war. No, it created a nation. And it literally turned the world upside down. So today, let's get into the story of the Siege of Yorktown.
This right here, this is the moment it all effectively ended. The surrender of British General Cornwallis. Now you might be thinking, was this the very last shot of the American Revolution? Well, not exactly, but it was the decisive blow, the knockout punch. After this, there was simply no coming back for the British.
So it really makes you wonder, right? How on earth did a pretty ragtag Continental Army and their French allies manage to trap the most powerful military on the planet? Well, the answer, it's just a masterclass in strategy, in serious risk-taking, and some truly incredible deception.
All right, let's set this scene. We're in the incredibly tense summer of 1781. The whole revolution is balanced on a knife's edge. Every single move from here on out is a huge, calculated gamble. You have to remember, after 6 long, brutal years, the war had basically ground to a halt. It was a stalemate. The American treasury, completely empty. Morale was just dangerously low. Honestly, both sides were just exhausted. The Franco-American alliance knew they needed just one, decisive knockout blow to finally win this thing.
So the commanders get together, and they're facing this huge choice. George Washington, for his part, was completely obsessed with retaking New York City. It was the main British stronghold, and he wanted it back. But the French commander, Rochambeau, he saw something else, a golden opportunity hundreds of miles to the south. He thought they could trap General Cornwallis's entire army down in Virginia. And you know what the tiebreaker was? It didn't come from a general on the ground. It came from an admiral at sea. A letter shows up from Admiral de Grasse, who's down in the West Indies, and he says he's sailing his massive, powerful fleet not to New York, but to the Chesapeake Bay, right off the coast of Virginia. And just like that, Rochambeau's southern gamble wasn't a gamble anymore. It was the plan. It was on.
Okay, so they have their target. But think about this. How in the world do you secretly march 2 massive armies, hundreds of miles south, without the main British force, sitting up in New York, noticing a thing? The answer is one of the greatest deceptions in military history. Seriously. So about 7,000 Allied troops start this grueling 450-mile march south. And to throw the British completely off the scent, Washington puts together this brilliant disinformation campaign. I mean, he has fake battle plans drawn up for an attack on New York. And then he makes sure they get intercepted by British spies. And you know what? General Clinton, up in New York, he bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. And that left Cornwallis down south dangerously exposed.
You know, this whole crazy, audacious plan really hinged on the amazing partnership between the commanders. Rochambeau, he was this veteran of huge European wars, and he deferred to Washington's command with this simple but incredibly powerful statement. That kind of mutual respect, that was the glue holding this entire, fragile operation together.
So, while the Allied armies are secretly marching south, the final pieces of this giant trap are starting to snap into place. And not just on land, but even more critically, out at sea.
And right on cue, just as planned, Admiral de Grasse's fleet arrives. On September 5th, they find the British Navy, engage them, and win the absolutely crucial Battle of the Chesapeake. This victory was everything. It drove the British ships all the way back to New York and just slammed the doors shut. Suddenly, Cornwallis was completely cut off. No supplies, no reinforcements, and absolutely no escape.
I mean, just look at the numbers. They really tell the whole story. On land, the Allies now outnumbered the British by more than 2-1. And at sea, the French warships had total, unquestioned control. For Cornwallis, this situation wasn't just desperate anymore, it was catastrophic. So by the end of September, the trap is fully sprung. The armies that march down from the north meet up with the forces already in Virginia, plus troops from de Grasse's fleet. From every single direction, land and sea, the net is closing tight around Yorktown. The siege is about to begin. All right, so now the Allies start to systematically tighten the noose. They're digging trenches, moving their cannons closer and closer to the British defenses. And the climax of this whole thing, it's all going to come down to one incredibly daring nighttime assault.
October 9th, the Allied cannons open fire. And legend has it that Washington himself ceremoniously lit the fuse on the very first gun. For days after that, it was just a relentless, deafening bombardment that absolutely tore into the British positions, smashing their defenses to bits.
But to really break the British lines for good, the Allies knew they had to capture two key outer forts. They were called Redoubt 9 and Redoubt 10. The plan was this super daring nighttime assault, and Washington's orders, they were chillingly clear. To maintain the element of surprise, the men were to advance with unloaded muskets. The entire attack would be made with only bayonets, with cold steel.
So, on the night of October 14th, it all goes down. The assaults begin. You have French troops storming Redoubt 9, while at the same time, American forces, led by a young, ambitious lieutenant colonel you may have heard of, Alexander Hamilton, charged Redoubt 10. It's pitch black. They're hacking through these wooden barriers with axes, scrambling over the walls. It was a brutal hand-to-hand fight.
And right in the middle of all that chaos, a soldier's cry just cuts through the noise. "Rush on, boys! The fort's ours!" In what was just a stunning feat, Hamilton's men captured Redoubt 10 in less than 10 minutes. The French took their objective not long after. The gamble, it had absolutely paid off.
And you know, capturing these redoubts, that was the final nail in the coffin. It meant the Allies could drag their heavy cannons even closer and create this inescapable crossfire that just pummeled the entire British position from 3 different directions. For Cornwallis, there was simply nowhere left to hide. The end was now inevitable.
So, with his defenses completely shattered and his army hopelessly trapped, Cornwallis had no choice. He had to face the unthinkable, surrender. But the final act of this incredible drama, well, it wasn't going to be about being generous winners. It was going to be about memory and a little bit of justice.
The British, they requested the traditional honors of war. Now that would have allowed their soldiers to march out proudly, with their flags flying and bayonets fixed. But Washington's reply was firm. It was a simple no. He told them he would grant them the exact same humiliating terms the British had forced on the defeated American army at Charleston just the year before. Oh yeah, the roles were now completely reversed.
So on October 19th, the British army marches out to surrender. And in a final kind of petulant move, General Cornwallis claims he's sick and sends his deputy to do the dirty work. So the British second-in-command tries to offer his sword to the French commander Rochambeau, but Rochambeau just points towards Washington. And then Washington, refusing to accept a surrender from a subordinate, directs the British officer to his own deputy, Benjamin Lincoln. The insult was returned, point for point. The surrender was complete.
And the impact of this victory, it was immediate and absolutely earth-shattering. You've got over 7,000 British troops captured. Back in London, support for the war just evaporated, practically overnight. Peace negotiations started almost immediately, and they led directly to the 1783 Treaty of Paris, which is where Great Britain formally recognized the independence of the United States of America.
So, you see, the victory at Yorktown, it did so much more than just end a battle. It birthed a nation. But that, of course, raises the ultimate question. Winning a war is one thing. A massive thing. But could this brand new fledgling nation born from a revolution and one hell of a gamble actually win the peace that followed?